You're listening to Beyond Bazaar True Crime, brought to you by AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to check out some of the other great true crime podcasts from this network, including The Murder in My Family, Missing Persons, DNA ID, Zodiac Speaking, Scene of the Crime, and 3 Men and a Mystery. All of these podcasts are available for you to binge on right now, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe where you're listening to this podcast so you don't miss an episode.
Welcome to another episode of Beyond Bazaar True Crime. We're your hosts for this episode, Jenn and Lindsay. We host the show Corpus Delicti, and in this episode, we will be talking about a case that is beyond bizarre.
In fact, it's so bizarre, the criminal ran a business named Bob's Bazaar. A man named Robert Berdella, a serial killer who stunned authorities because he kept detailed notes and photos of his tortured and raped victims.
Robert was described as a loner growing up, partially due to a speech impediment and having to wear thick glasses at an early age. He was also verbally and physically abused by his father, who thought his son wasn't man enough. This made it worse when his younger brother was born, who could seemingly do no wrong. Robert, or Bob, was an artist, and his father thought he should be better at sports. He also developed an ingrained hatred of women, which some attribute to his mother remarrying after his father's death. He retreated for a time, with only his passion, his stamp and coin collection. In high school, he did realize that he was gay and kept it a secret until college. He was also possibly sexually assaulted by a coworker. His father then died of a heart attack at the age of 39, leaving the teen searching for answers within the church. Not finding what he was hoping for, he began to explore other religions and occult groups. Unfortunately, in college, he became involved in drugs and began torturing animals. He even tortured and killed one as part of an art project in college, for which he was reprimanded, causing him to leave the school. He also used sedatives on a dog in school.
After school, he settled in Kansas City, Missouri. He worked as a chef for a while and then opened a business called Bob's Bazaar. Here he sold art, jewelry, and antiques throughout the 70s and 80s. Well, also he sold oddities. Some report that some of the items sold were of an occult nature. He also spent lots of time with runaways, addicts, and male sex workers. When people would ask him why he hung out with these people, he'd say he was mentoring them. But in reality, it was more physical than that. It's speculated that he sexually assaulted and or raped many of them and engaged in very domineering relationships with them since he had money and they didn't. Meanwhile, he also helped establish and work with a neighborhood crime watch unit. His neighbors thought he was helpful and community-focused, although sometimes he could be rude towards women. He always brought good food to neighborhood block parties, and no one suspected a thing. One neighbor later said, "I thought he was a father figure to those kids, and I got adjusted to the fact that there were boys at his house." The neighbor went on to say, "He led us to believe he was a nice guy, a leader in the community. He was very active and made us feel like second-class residents because we were not active."
But in July of 1984, things took a darker turn. This was when his first murder occurred. Jerry Howell was only 19 years old when Berdella offered to give him a ride to a dance competition. Being one of his father's friends, Jerry didn't think much about it. But Robert offered him alcohol, which he accepted. It had been laced with drugs and it knocked Jerry out. He spent 28 hours tied up, raped, and tortured by him. Jerry died after choking on a gag in his own vomit. Robert hung Jerry's body upside down, made cuts into the major arteries, and let the blood drain out. The next day, he dismembered the body and placed the parts in trash bags. He left him out by the road for the sanitation cleaners to get it. Jerry Howell's staff suspected him from the get-go and let it be known, but no evidence could be found at the time.
Things were calm until April 1985, when 23-year-old Robert Sheldon came knocking on Berdella's door. He had known the man from his days of mentoring. Sheldon was asking for a place to stay. He too was drugged, but this time it was using chemicals. He was bound with piano wire before having drain solution put in his eyes, caulk in his ears, and needles under his fingernails. For a moment, Berdella felt bad and actually did take him to a doctor, but he threatened Sheldon not to say what had really happened. But after the doctor's appointment, he changed his mind and brought Sheldon back to his home. The torture likely would have continued even longer if Berdella didn't have contractors coming to his house to perform work. This was when he decided he had to kill Robert Sheldon. Sheldon was suffocated and dismembered before being thrown away. Mark Wallace, Walter James Ferris, and Todd Stoops all suffered similar fates after trying to reside with Berdella in need of housing. They too were tortured using electrical shocks, drain cleaner, and hypodermic needles. In 1987, Berdella held Larry Wayne Pearson as his prisoner for 6 long weeks, hoping to turn him into a submissive sex slave. But when Pearson tried to retaliate, he was beaten and strangled to death.
March of 1988. Bob solicited Christopher Brynson for sex, bringing him home to his house, where Christopher was tied up after being beaten with a metal bar. He too was held and tortured, but Christopher was able to sweet-talk him enough to convince him to keep his hands tied in front of him as opposed to being tied to the bed. This gave Chris a perfect opportunity when Bob accidentally left matches in the room, which Chris grabbed and used to burn his robes. This had been part of a reward for good behavior Chris had received earlier, a cigarette. He was fortunate enough to escape out of the second-story window uninjured. He ran down the street naked and beaten, with nothing but a dog collar around his neck, until he found a neighbor to call the police. Christopher was questioned for days about the incident. He said that Bob told him he'd live if he cooperated and that he was repeatedly sodomized. He also explained how his captor injected drain cleaner into his throat and eyes and attached wires to his legs to shock him. Now Bob was arrested for assaulting Bryson. His bond was set at $500,000 but was later revoked. In the meantime, a criminal profiler was brought in. This was unconventional as they had already had their suspect. But this wasn't to find the killer. It was to find potential victims, as the incident couldn't have been the first. Sergeant John Perry worked up Bob's profile and run against missing person reports to see if any of them had fit the case. And it worked. Gerald Howell and Walter James Ferris were immediately on their radar as potential victims. This was enough to get a warrant to search Bob's home, but no one was quite prepared what they found inside.
In an upstairs closet, police found a human skull and backbone with clear marks where they had been cut. Then, buried in the backyard, there was another partially decomposed human head. There were blood-stained barrels, belongings from 2 missing persons, and approximately 200 pictures of men being tortured right there in the open, most of which were taken with a Polaroid-type instant camera. At least one of them appeared to be dead and was tied up upside down, and over 50 of the pictures were Chris himself, which corroborated his story. If this wasn't enough, Bob Berdella had kept a notebook or journal which outlined every abduction, rape, torture, and killing of 6 men total, most aged 18 to 22, earning him the nickname of the Kansas City Butcher. The journal was complete with his own abbreviations such as EK, which meant electric shock, and CP, which means chlorpromazine. He also detailed his victims' reactions as if it were some sick scientific experiment. It's not known why he disposed of some victims but kept or buried others, but he also may have given them antibiotics to keep them alive longer and extend his reign of terror on them. Occultist paraphernalia was also found, as well as animal bones, bird feathers, and other really odd items. Police seized 2 circular saws, a hacksaw, a miter saw, a disassembled jigsaw, 14 jigsaw blades, knives, scissors, and clippers from Berdella's house. Now, he was charged with murder.
On December 19, 1988, Bob pled guilty to first-degree murder in the death of victim Robert Shelton and 4 counts of second-degree murder. But this was a long time coming. He was silent about the whole thing for a while. This was part of a plea deal in which the death penalty was removed from the table. He was sentenced to a term of life imprisonment. In prison, Bob spent a lot of time under psychiatric evaluation, where it was learned that he thought that he was good and an upstanding person who just happened to make a few mistakes. Bob referred to himself as the neighbor next door. He also said that a movie called The Collector, based on a book, had affected him. In this story, a man abducts a young woman and keeps her captive. In a TV interview, Bob referred to his victims as play toys. He also said that this was all the fault of the police for simply not stopping him sooner.
Robert Berdella has been labeled a sexual sadist and is often compared to Jeffrey Dahmer, especially when Dahmer's victims were found in the 90s. The media saw a striking resemblance, although Berdella was not cannibalistic. But the kidnapping and drugging is what caused this comparison. On October 8, 1992, Bob Berdella died of a heart attack. He was 43 years old and had only served 4 years of his sentence. Before his death, he claimed that guards were not giving him his heart medicine, but his death was never investigated. The judge on his case, upon hearing this news, said, "Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy."
Thanks again for joining us in this episode of Beyond Bazaar True Crime. We hope you'll listen to our show, Corpus Delicti. You can find it on your favorite podcatcher or on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Be sure to tune in to the next episode of Beyond Bazaar True Crime, which will be hosted by Eric Carter Landon from the True Consequences podcast. As we wrap up, we want to leave you a short preview of our show. Thanks. Corpus Delicti is a Latin term that means the body of a crime. It's the proof that a crime has been committed, which is necessary before finding out who committed the crime. And crimes certainly don't all look the same.
Corpus Delicti is also a true crime podcast that takes a serious approach into various ways crimes are committed. Cruise ship deaths, historical crimes, and women who kill are just a few of the themes we have covered cases on. We even dive deep into the case of a likely innocent man on death row in our home state of Alabama.
We're coming up on 200 episodes soon, so there's plenty to binge. Join us every week wherever you get your podcasts as we dive into a new case within our current series.
That's CorpusDelicti. Hope to see you soon.
Beyond Bazaar True Crime is produced by Mike Morford and Jess Betancourt for AbJack Entertainment, with music by Connor Betancourt. If you enjoy this podcast, make sure to subscribe wherever you are listening now, and please take a moment to rate and review the show. You can find Beyond Bazaar True Crime on social media. We're on Twitter and Instagram with the handle @BeyondBazaarTC. You can also find us on Facebook by searching for Beyond Bazaar True Crime Podcast. The views and opinions of the hosts and guests on Beyond Bazaar True Crime do not necessarily represent those of the show's creators, producers, or sponsors. Be sure to tune in on Saturdays for all new episodes of Beyond Bazaar True Crime.